Hello, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Overtime Podcast, a Cold Front Report multicast. I'm one of your two co-hosts, Clayton Garrett. You can find me on Twitter at @RClayton, and joining me as always,
I am Jeff Uvino. You can find me on Twitter at RealJUVEINO.
Jeff, this is I don't know. This is probably the strangest conclusion to a game that I've ever seen. I can't say. Personally, that I've ever seen in a Bills game. That was just remarkable. I know it's kind of ironic that we're going to start a show off by talking about the last play, but what were your overall thoughts about that? What had just transpired?
Initial thoughts, I think everybody was in shock. It was just kind of like half, are you kidding me? And half, really? I mean, we can talk all we want about how that play happened. You know, Hopkins made a great play. It is what it is. You can't allow that to happen if you're the Bills secondary, but it is what it is. And I think that Bills Mafia has collectively just kind of tried to move on and say, well, there's nothing we can do about it. Time to regroup in the bye week and see what we have going forward.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. Be sure to leave your questions in the comment sections to those that are watching live. Be sure to leave your comments and questions in the comment section, and we'll talk about those throughout the duration of the show. But that last play, I don't know. Everybody wanted to point a finger, you know, that because that's just natural instinct is everybody wants to blame somebody. Everybody wants, you know, a definitive answer of if this guy did this better, then this wouldn't have happened. No. DeAndre Hopkins just went out there and made a DeAndre Hopkins play. I don't care if there was 3 defenders there or 11. That was incredible. It looked like nothing was stopping DeAndre Hopkins from catching that ball. He jumped over 3 other defenders to catch the ball. You can say what you will about Trey White not having position or Micah Hyde not having position. There's 3 dudes to 3 sides of the guy's body. There's one in front, one behind, one to his left, and all are trying to get the ball, and he just so happened to come away with it. I'm not going to sit here and gripe schematically about what the play was called. I'm not going to sit here and say any one player could have done better. DeAndre Hopkins is a special football player, as is Kyler Murray. That was an incredible throw. I'm not even going to say anything about Mario Addison making the tackle on that, I don't know, lackluster effort to make a sack. That was just from top to bottom. It was just a special play. There's not much you can do about that. It's not like they got beat on a trick play and it was a complete lapse of discipline and what have you. That was just a Hail Mary, and that's exactly what it was. It was a Hail Mary, and the odds are slim that they're going to complete that pass, but hey, they did.
But there's no way that Trey White should allow that to be happening. I understand Hopkins has however much vertical on him. He's however much taller, has however much longer reach. You can't let that happen. I'm not solely blaming this play or the Bills losing on Trey White, obviously, but you're the 3rd highest paid corner in the league. You can't let that happen. You can't let that happen. The blame goes on the safeties as well, but somebody just has to make that play. You have to knock it away. I mean, how do you allow that to happen if you're Trey White?
Somebody has to make the play, Jeff, and DeAndre made it. Hopkins made the play. Like, I get what you're saying. But throughout the game, aside from that catch, Hopkins was held to 6 catches for 84 yards. That's pretty modest compared to performances in other weeks. There have been games this season where DeAndre Hopkins has just straight up taken over the game and completely changed that defense and wrecked that defense from start to finish. And he was a complete mismatch for those teams. And I understand how the complaint that Trey White needs to make that play. I get that. You'd like to see something better on that play from Trey White other than just getting mossed. I understand that completely. But from the first quarter to the last, DeAndre Hopkins was held relatively in check, under 100 receiving yards in this game, aside from the Hail Mary touchdown catch, which obviously is the play everybody wants to focus on. And I get that. That was an incredible play. That's going to be one of the most immortalized plays in NFL history, like any Hail Mary catch should be, because that play is so rarely converted or completed. It's remarkable any time that it is. But I have to disagree with you in the sense that Trey White, I know you're not trying to say he had a bad game, and that was just more or less a bad play on his end. But in the grand scheme of things, I thought Trey White did a good job in this game containing DeAndre Hopkins.
I don't think he had a bad game. I think he allowed an inexcusable play to happen. And I don't know how the Bills secondary is giving Hopkins any room in the end zone. You know that Murray wants to throw to him. You know that the Cardinals' best chance of winning that game is throwing the ball into the end zone with Hopkins. I mean, maybe they had time for another play, but how are you allowing him any space? I mean, Murray's rolling to his left. Hopkins is going across the field. How are you not have somebody sitting in the end zone waiting for that to happen? I mean, you pay these secondary players so much money and they just allow that to happen. And what if that would have happened in a playoff game? What if that would have happened in a playoff game? And then where are we? And then where are we putting the blame for that? I hate to say it, but you can't allow that to happen. You can't. The Bills secondary as a whole, but especially Trey White.
Don't put that in my head. Don't put that in my head. I do not want to envision the Bills losing on a Hail Mary ever again. As long as I walk this earth, I never want to see them lose a game on a Hail Mary again. It was honestly, it sucked because you put the situation of people watching that game. Oh my goodness, Josh Allen just went down there with another game-winning drive, and that was one hell of a pass to Stephon Diggs at the end of that drive to with 34 seconds left in the game, they scored a touchdown, and that was seen as the game winner. So it's just it was so improbable what Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins did on that drive. It really was. And with 11 seconds left, wow. That was crazy. Like, what are the odds that I did not expect that happening. Every time that happens where a team has a game-winning drive at the end of the game and the other team has some sort of amount of light at the end of the tunnel to have some sort of possession, you think of it as almost impossible. But you saw that it was very much so possible. And I think that, that last game-winning drive, what would have been Josh Allen's, I believe, 12th game-winning drive, is lost in this, obviously, because they lost the game and it's not a game-winning drive. But that was an incredible throw on that last possession by Josh Allen to Stephon Diggs for what would have been the game-winning touchdown.
Yeah, it was. And it gets overshadowed. I mean, that thought has been thrown around there a lot the last couple days, is that Josh Allen led another fourth quarter drive after he had made some mistakes in the drives before, and he really kind of buckled in and came up clutch on that last drive that everybody thought was going to win the game. I thought that the turnovers played a big role in this game. Whenever either team turned over the ball, it seemed like momentum shifted a lot. You come out and start the second half, Kenyon Drake fumbles the football, Bills get the ball, score, and you're up 23-9 at that point. I mean, that is huge. And then Allen throws the 2 picks. Cardinals get a lot of momentum back. They take the lead. And so I think that even was more impressive to me from Allen's standpoint, is after he had made some mistakes, he didn't play great in the second half up to that point. He was able to pull it together and lead that drive. And I also want to talk about Cole Beasley on third down. It's been a theme all season. He's always there on third down. I mean, that 3rd and 5 catch when he was on the sideline, at the top of your TV screen, pulling it in about 2 yards past the markers. I mean, if it wasn't for that, who knows if they even get to the point for the Diggs touchdown. There were a lot of really good plays made on that drive, and it was really encouraging for me to see from Allen to be able to lead that drive at the end of the game.
All right. Now I'm going to ask the viewers, then I'm going to ask you, Jeff. Everybody in the comments section, I want to see a letter grade for what you would give Josh Allen for this performance. I understand there's a lot of factors you have to put in there, the interceptions, I don't really care about his statistics, to be honest. The turnovers are worth more to me than 500 yards are. You have to factor in that what would have been a game-winning drive. Just everybody in the comments, drop what you would think the letter grade would be for Josh Allen's performance against the Cardinals. Now, Jeff, if you had to give Josh Allen a letter grade, what would you give him?
Well, I think that the 2 interceptions are definitely hindering for him, but he led a game-winning drive, so it's hard to be too critical. 289 yards. I'm going to give him a B+, and it would be a B other than that last drive. Give him the B+, because, yeah, if we're having a completely different conversation if that play doesn't happen at the end. If Hopkins doesn't make that play, we're having a completely different conversation about the performance of everybody, really. And so I'll give him a B+.
Yeah, it's difficult for me. It really is. Everybody's chiming in with their grades. I see a lot of B's, but I'm going to agree with Lone Wolf over here on YouTube with a C+. That's exactly what I'd give Allen for this game. Those turnovers were detrimental. And I understand they're not put on the stat sheet, but he did throw 2 other ones right to Patrick Peterson's chest. And ball don't lie, Patrick Peterson ended up getting that interception at the end of the game. That game, because of the game-winning drive, I would say that I'd give him a B- because of the game-winning drive, but that's just I feel like that's just too nice. That just is. It wasn't a game-winning drive. It was a clutch drive in the fourth quarter that I mean, seemingly won them the game, but it didn't. Oh, there was a big lag. I'm sorry, but yeah, I don't know. Allen, the turnovers in this game were detrimental to what the Bills were trying to do with the football. You look at when they happened and how they happened. The first one, you were right around midfield, and the second one was the same exact position of the field. You're starting to cross over into opponent's territory, and you give them the ball back. It shouldn't have happened. It shouldn't have. That you can't be turning the ball over in those situations. You simply cannot. At this stage of, I wouldn't say his career, every quarterback's going to turn the ball over until they're 45, but you can't be making mistakes like that in that stage of the game and expect to come away with a victory. And, I really felt like Josh Allen's performance, Josh Allen put them in the position that they were in at the end of the game. I felt like, I mean, you could say the defense did as well in the second half, given their lackluster performance after the first half. But Josh Allen didn't do them any favors in the second half, and neither did Brian Dable, in my opinion.
Yeah, I thought this was kind of a typical Allen game. He came out and looked tremendous out of the start. The first half, the Bills' offense looked really good. The third quarter, he had the woes like he has this all the season. And then he came back and led that big drive at the end of the game. And if the identity of Josh Allen is going to be a guy who makes a few bad throws every game but can make plays for you in the fourth quarter, I'll take that 100%. I mean, he makes bad throws. When we have been talking about Josh Allen as an MVP candidate this season, it's because he hasn't been making those bad throws. He's still making plays at the same rate that he was before, but he wasn't making those bad throws, throwing the ball inexplicably into the hands of the other team's secondary, like he did on really both of his interceptions and a couple other balls. I mean, the corner made a nice play, jumped the route on the one pick, but the other, I mean, who the hell was that going to? He makes a couple of those plays every game, but him having that fourth quarter drive in him and him having the composure to lead those drives, especially when things haven't gone that well the rest of the game, that's really encouraging to me. And it's a great sign out of your young quarterback. People forget Josh Allen is in his third year in the NFL. And he's only played in one playoff game. And I mean, relatively speaking, not a lot of big game experience. And he continues to come out week after week and deal with adversity and lead this team back down the field. And he's going to make those mistakes. That's okay. I mean, the best quarterbacks in NFL history don't make those mistakes, but most do. And so that's why I defend my B+, because I think anytime a quarterback is leading a game-winning drive, sheesh, C is a little hard on him.
Yeah, I understand that, but
but the mistakes were there. The mistakes were there, and maybe it's just kind of the shit. Here we go, Josh again. Here goes Josh throwing the ball to the other team, blah blah blah. But then he comes back and he makes up for it. And I'd rather have a guy who's going to deal with those mistakes and come back from them and learn from them than a guy who isn't going to make the big plays late in the game but might not throw 2 picks.
Despite my C+, I do agree with everything you just said. The fact that he was able to make the mistakes that he made in this game and not mentally or physically shut down and stop chucking the ball is why Josh Allen is a good quarterback. That's exactly that trait right there. The lack of fear when throwing the football, that's what makes Josh Allen a better quarterback than a lot of people give him credit for. I understand, it's kind of a double-sided sword. Sometimes it'll go in favor of the Bills, sometimes it won't. And 2 times this week, you saw it go to the other team. The beginning of your point, you started off by saying the reason why we've been talking about him in the MVP discussion is because those plays weren't happening through the majority of the season. Now, it's not discouraging to see those 2 interceptions happen. But your overall point being the fact that he was able to maintain poise, maintain composure, and able to lead that team at the end of the game. I mean, that Cardinals drive, or the drive at the end of the game, was very similar to the one that we saw against the Rams in Week 3. I felt like, you saw a little bit of everything. You saw some improvisation. You saw a lot of some Josh Allen running, and you also saw him capping it off with a touchdown pass. And as good as that drive was, it sucks that it didn't lead to his 12th game winning drive. I felt like, Josh Allen, he always has that drive him at the end of the game. If there's a minute left in the game, the Bills get the ball and they have an opportunity to score, I have a hard time not believing that they're going to. Josh Allen has really kind of made that his thing ever since he's taken over as quarterback. And it doesn't really matter who it's against. It doesn't have to be against a good team. It doesn't have to be against a bad team. He's done it against both quality teams. He's done it numerous times against numerous different teams for me to believe, yeah, he's just got that clutch gene. He has that it factor. But they were in that situation at the end of the game due to the lack of execution throughout the game. And with that, I also agree with a comment here. Let me find it real quick. AJ Cherry on Facebook. He says, I hope they quit throwing 40 to 50 times a game. They can't win being one-dimensional all of the time. They have to get the run game going. And this leads into the discussion that I wanted to have tonight about Brian Daboll, because I felt like the Bills' inability to run the ball in this game is really what kind of hurt their flow, is really what kind of hurt their rhythm on the offensive side of the ball, and really just, being one-dimensional. It limited their opportunities with the ball in their hands. Jeff, what did you think about Allen throwing the ball 49 times in this game, even though they were up 23-9 with more than halfway through the third quarter?
Mm-hmm. I think that's kind of become the identity of the Bills offense. I mean, it's been a theme that we've seen the whole time, and mostly, maybe not mostly, but in large part because running game has not been effective. I've said before, when the Bills rush for 5 yards a carry in a game, they're likely going to win that game. In this game, I'm trying to pull up however many it was, 4.1 yards per carry this game. 4.1 yards per carry for the Bills this game. And when they can get to that 5 number, they oftentimes win. I don't know if it's a magic number, but it seems like when they can get to the 5, they have more success. And, I think, but would you agree with me that the passing has just become the identity of the offense?
Yeah, I agree with you, but the identity, you shouldn't stick to your identity to the fault. That's kind of where I believe. But yes, I do agree with you that the passing is the identity of the offense overall.
And if that's all that's working, though, because I would love for the Bills to have a great run game. I'd love for the Bills to be able to run more, but it doesn't work. It oftentimes doesn't work. So what are you going to do? Just keep running the ball into the line of scrimmage and not get anywhere? Or are you going to use your quarterback who's leading the NFL in passing?
I'm sorry. I was reading the comments. No, I understand what you're saying. The offense, I believe not having your starting center in there did play a factor in this game. They were missing 2 starters along the defensive line for the Arizona Cardinals. And the fact that the Bills' offensive line couldn't get the ideal push up front that you would really look for to have a sustainable and efficient running game, that was disappointing. I thought they had matchups to be won up front on the line of scrimmage. But then again, they were starting Ike Bacher and Brian Winters, who both have been very lackluster this season in all of their performance. I know Ike Bacher had a really high PFF grade a couple weeks ago, but I don't know how much credit people give PFF grades anymore, given just how swayed they've been with Josh Allen ever since he came to Buffalo. But that running game, like you said, they weren't really getting much done on the ground this week at 4.1 yards per carry. They did have limited opportunities. I just, I feel like we say it every week that they should establish a running game, that they need to establish more of a running game. And that's normally what leads to the faults of this offense. But, Brian Daboll, he has Stephon Diggs, he has John Brown, he has Cole Beasley, and he has Josh Allen, who Josh Allen's not going to pull any punches. Josh Allen's going to keep throwing the ball until his arm falls off. So do I get it? Yeah. But at the same time, it's not what I do. I don't understand it. I get it. This is one of the best passing offenses in the league, and it's been what has won them games thus far. But not having a running game when you need one, that is going to lose you games in the future. And you could argue that it has in the past this season as well as last season.
Yeah, and I mean, the lack of a run game could hurt you in the future as far as being the difference between a win and a loss. But I personally am done saying that running the ball is going to be a key to the game for the Bills the rest of the season. I'm done saying that because the Bills, with limited success running the ball, have now been in shootouts with two of the NFL's best teams back-to-back weeks, and they very well could have come away 2-0. And so that's why I've said this before. I'm comfortable with the Bills in a shootout against anybody. I'm comfortable with Josh Allen in a shootout against anybody. You do that to Russell Wilson, you do it to Kyler Murray back-to-back weeks, and you almost beat both of them. It's pretty impressive. And I mean, run the ball all you want. That would be great. But I don't think that I am going to say that again as far as being a key to the Bills winning, because they've shown that they can do it without it, regardless of who they play. Now, these two defenses the last couple weeks, not great. That the Bills have played, the Seahawks and the Cardinals defenses. However, how many NFL teams really have that complete package, the offense and the defense? I mean, the Steelers, Bills haven't played the Steelers. We'll see how that game goes. But I think that being able to throw the ball all over the field and just showing that you can compete with these other pass-heavy offenses and, be in the game with them is encouraging, regardless of what you say about the run game. It's encouraging. I also want to remind everybody that I did pick the Cardinals last week. And although it may be a fluke win, I did pick the Cardinals, and people went off on me saying, how could you say the Bills are only going to score 23 points? They scored 30. So they had one more touchdown than I envisioned. That Josh Allen kind of fooled me a bit with that game-winning drive. However, the Cardinals did win. And, I said the Cardinals would have 31 points. They had 32. So regardless of how you get them done.
Oh, victory lap, Uvino.
I just didn't know when I'd be able to get it in. So there we go.
You're fine. I'd be doing the same thing if I were that close with any score. I will admit I've had a lot of 1-point differentials from what I predicted to what happened. But
I get that it was the Hail Mary, whatever. It shouldn't have happened. But that's just how it goes with those West Coast games. It's a 4:30 start. You got to sit there all day until the Bills are on. You're playing a forever away in Glendale, and just something like that happens and you lose. And that's why I had a bad feeling going into this last weekend. For once, I was right. So
I understand. But, I like what you had to say about this Bills offense. Despite the fact that they can't get the running game, that they have yet to get the running game going in any game aside from the New England game, it is encouraging that they have been able to stick toe-to-toe with two of the best, statistically the best offense in the league this past week with the Cardinals, as well as what has been noted as the MVP in Russell Wilson the previous week. And I want to talk about the Bills defense and their performance in this game. Jeff, how did you feel the Bills defense performed in this game? Did you think they did well in the first half and a little less in the second half? Do you think that it was an overall good game and they met your expectations against one of the most potent offenses in the league? What were your thoughts?
Other than the last play, yes, I'd say the Cardinals defense or the Bills defense did meet my expectations. Kyler Murray, he's going to beat you one way or another. And I thought that they limited him really well for the most part. And the plays that make me say that are the ones where he's scrambling. He's got a lot of time to throw. The Bills defensive lineman is pursuing him, but he is out of the pocket and he's obviously trying to run, because when Murray gets out of the pocket, he is so quick. He can cut on a dime and he can use his legs so effectively picking up first downs. And there were a few plays where Murray got away from a few defenders and went towards the sideline and he just didn't have anywhere to go. He eventually just had to go out of bounds because, the Bills had good pursuit and they had everybody accounted for. And, that takes good coverage from the secondary as well. But I thought that the Bills did a good enough job containing Kyler Murray. Those two rushing touchdowns that Murray had, bad play by the defensive end on those. I believe it was Mario Addison on the one that was just in left field when Murray took that ball and ran. Whatever, he's going to beat you one way or another. But I thought they were sufficient, and they forced a couple turnovers too, or one turnover. But I thought it was a solid performance, because if it weren't for the last play, they would have done enough to win the game. I mean, giving up 20, 25, whatever points to that offense, 26 points to that offense really isn't horrible in my opinion, because like we said, you got the offense to back it up.
The one thing that remained consistent this week on the defensive side of the ball was their ability to create turnovers. And that's huge when winning games, just like Lone Wolf in the comments, right on cue. We gave up over 20 yards on the ground in the running game again. And, that's really kind of been the bugaboo of this defense is the run defense. They're missing that that ideal one technique defensive tackle in the middle has really kind of dampened this Bills defense from top to bottom. Kenyon Drake had over 100 yards rushing in this game, I believe. Over 100 yards. And I completely forget about it. And, Kenyon Drake, he is what he is. He hasn't been very impressive this year. It's been a letdown season when you consider his performance from last season when he got moved to Arizona. But 217 yards on the ground, I feel really is what lost this defense the game. But I will say the defense made stops when they needed to make stops. And that's really that's really what changes the complexion of how I feel about this Bills defense. In the first 2.5 quarters, they only gave up 9 points. And that's not I didn't feel like that was bad. It wasn't bad at all. They were up 23-9 and they went up 23-9 off of a turnover that I believe it was the Jordan Poyer interception. If I could be wrong. But that's really what changed this game was the fact that the defense was able to get timely stops, because if they didn't get those stops, we're not even talking about a game-winning drive. We're not. Stopping that team after the 12-yard punt by Bajorquez for a 3-and-out, that so clutch. This defense, similar to Josh Allen, they made plays when they needed to make plays to win this game. They did. Aside from the Hail Mary pass, they made plays at opportune times in order for this team to come away with a victory. And it just, I don't know. And, since AJ Cherry's bringing it up in the comments, and it's all I ever see across my Twitter feed, it's all I see throughout Facebook, always said not sold. So correct this on the screen. I'm not sold on Miami. Tua will come back down to earth. Jeff, Bills are 7-3. Dolphins are 6-3. Bills have a half game lead over the Dolphins in the AFC East. Are you worried about the Miami Dolphins?
I'll put it this way. I think the Bills are a better team than the Miami Dolphins. They're a more complete team, and I don't think Tua is beating Josh Allen in a shootout. And you're just not going to change my mind about that. There's no way Tua and Allen going back and forth. Allen is the better quarterback right now. Maybe he won't be in the future. Who knows? But right now, Josh Allen is beating Tua, and I think you'll see that in their matchup later in the season.
I think it's inevitable that Tua Tagovailoa is going to be a better quarterback, Jeff. I mean, the league's so easy for him 3 games in. How could it not? How could he not be a better quarterback? That was such an asinine comment. I can't believe he said something like that. It's just like, I didn't expect it to be this easy. Wow. You took over a team. You're winning with defense and special teams, and you're just being a game manager. I don't know. I don't see it. I'm not buying the Miami hype. They're winning by playing. I'm saying Miami is a solid team. They are. They're playing solid complementary football at this moment in time. Their defense, their special teams has been lights out. But Tua Tagovailoa saying this league is easy, I don't know. I think he spoke a little too soon on that. I'm waiting for one disgusting game from that quarterback to just put him on the burner. Just put him on I'm going to make so many memes at the first bad stat line that I see about Tua Tagovailoa. But to answer the overall question as to whether or not I'm worried about the Miami Dolphins contending for the AFC East with the Buffalo Bills, which will I'm assuming it'll ultimately come down to that Week 17 matchup. I mean, there's a lot of football between now and then, but like you said, Jeff, I don't think Tua's got it when facing Josh Allen. I just don't. I got a hunch that I don't think he could really keep up with Josh Allen, and he's a baby in this league. I mean, you could say Josh Allen is too, but he's played for 12 quarters. It's just that I don't know. He spoke a little too soon on that. I feel like he got caught up in the moment or what have you, and it came off the tongue, and I believe it was a poor choice of words, but I cannot wait to make fun of him when I have my first opportunity.
But credit to the Dolphins. I mean, if they win this week, they're tied for first place in the division. And it looks like, I know that New England won this past week, but it looks like it might be a 2-horse race between Buffalo and Miami in the division. And props to them for being there, but I just don't see them being able to knock off Buffalo at this point.
I don't see it happening. But with that, Jeff, do you have a stud? Do you have a dud? Do you have studs? Do you have duds? First, who's your first stud of this game?
My stud is Cole Beasley. Mr. Reliable. When you need him, he's there. I already said it tonight. 3rd down, you need a reception, go to Cole Beasley. He's got great hands. We know how hard he is to guard, and he always seems to be there when you need a play, whether it's 3rd and 5 and he's making a great catch on the sideline to convert that first down, or it's 1st and 20 and he picks up a chunk of 15 beating his zone coverage. He's always there, and Cole Beasley is a very, very valuable part of this football team.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more that Cole Beasley is one of the most important assets to not only the football team, but the Bills offense. But Adam Shepard in the comments, he's right ahead of me. Tyler Bass. Man, dude, I've made enough memes about this guy to just be like, okay, I got to give it to him, because I never said Tyler Bass is awful. I just like joking about bad kickers. It's fun. It really is. But in all seriousness, Tyler Bass converting 3 50-plus yard field goals this week. I'm not sure if that's ever been done, but I do know he's one of only 2 players in NFL history to make multiple kicks of 54-plus yards in a single game. That's incredible. Tyler Bass, I mean, left hash, right hash, dead center, he nailed them all this weekend. He was kicking with confidence, and that's what you like to see. Obviously, it was in a dome in Glendale, but, you know, Tyler Bass was sinking those field goals right down the pipes on all of his attempts. I think there's a lot of confidence to be had with the Bills' young rookie kicker. You're talking about a player who's a little over halfway through his rookie season. He obviously went through the turbulences that you will going into the NFL. You know, he missed his fair share of kicks to start the season in the first half of the year, but making 3+ 50-yard field, or three field goals of 50+ yards, is huge for any kicker, not just a rookie. And also, I think it's important to note that the Bills only attempted 5 50-plus yard field goals all of last season with Steven Hauschka. You know how many they made? They only made 1. Hauschka was 1 for 5 from 50-plus. And in most situations where you'd think, oh, well, maybe they can trot out their kicker for a 50-some-odd yard field goal, they wouldn't, because they did not have confidence in Steven Hauschka that he'd convert those kicks, obviously, with his 20% field goal percentage from that distance. But, hey, I'm just saying, Tyler Bass, he's gaining some steam. He's gaining some confidence. And if it's one thing I like, is the kicker with confidence. Jeff, who is your dud of the week?
I mean, is it too basic to put it on the Bills secondary for allowing the Hail Mary to happen?
Oh, he's got the hat trick. He's got the hat trick.
Is it?
Put 3 hats on his duds.
Is it?
I mean, I wouldn't say it's harsh. It's fair.
Yeah. I don't want to go at Mario Addison too much, but he was a no man's land on the one Kyler rushing touchdown on the rate option. You got to know he's going to keep it there. And then he missed the tackle late in the game, so not a great game from him. But yeah, I mean, I'm not too unhappy with anything that happened in this game.
I don't know. It's
tough, isn't it? It's
whoa.
It's tough.
Breaking the fourth wall. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyways, my dud of the week has to be Trent Murphy. It has to be Trent Murphy. There were way too many occasions where I saw Trent Murphy. You know, we spoke earlier of the 217 rushing yards that the Cardinals had in this game. I saw Trent Murphy getting his rear handed to him by tight ends in this game. And as a defensive end in the Professional Football League, that can't happen, sir. You cannot be getting blocked by tight ends if you are supposed to be, if you're making $9 million to play defensive end in the NFL. That simply can't happen. Trent Murphy's a dud because he's always been a dud. He's been a dud signing. He's been a dud player. I don't care how he looks against bad offensive lines. He's a dud. He's a mediocre football player. And today was as mediocre as it gets from Trent Murphy. But with that, it's a bye week. There's no game to preview for us this week. So what are we going to do? Jeff and I are going to run through 3 positive and 3 negative takeaways for the Buffalo Bills this season thus far. We'll start off positive. Do you want to go all positive and then all negative, or you want to alternate?
Let's go all positive.
All right, let's start it off on a positive note. The first positive note for this Buffalo Bills football team in 2020 has to be the Bills passing offense. Josh Allen playing at a borderline MVP level thus far. I wouldn't even say thus far, but it's at points he's looked like the most valuable football player in the league. And then not to mention he leads the league in passing yards. And then he has the leading receiver right on his right boundary or left boundary or whatever. He has the leading receiver in receiving yards, Stephon Diggs. They've both been incredible this year. The Bills' passing offense has been incredible this year. It really has. And, like you said earlier in the show, Jeff, it's really been the heartbeat of this football team and why they've had as much success as they have, as they've had. And you've seen the offensive improvement from 2019 to 2020. And, Stephon Diggs has been a large part in that.
Yeah, you were a lot more confident coming into the season than I was about Allen's ability to play at this level. While I was optimistic, I was hesitant because I wasn't sure exactly what we were going to see from him in year 3. However, I think that a lot of Bills fans can agree that through week 10, Josh Allen has exceeded all expectations. I mean, he's played really, really well. The Bills could be 8-2. You don't go 8-2 without stellar play from your quarterback. It just doesn't happen. And Stephon Diggs, I mean, he's been everything you could want and more. I mean, we found ourselves during the NFL draft, seeing all those good receivers go off the board, and you say, okay, is Diggs worth what we could have gotten here? Is Diggs worth what we could have gotten there? Absolutely. He's the NFL's leading receiver, and he has been tremendous. He's reliable, just like Beasley is, and he makes big plays. He makes big plays in the short game, in the medium game, and the deep game. And the Bills have developed themselves as a pass-first, pass-heavy offense, and a damn good one. And it's the first time in my lifetime that I've seen that.
Oh, yeah. It is. It's nice. It's nice. I've never seen a Bills passing offense as good as the one they have right now. And I think they're only getting better, to be quite honest with you. We both touched on Stephon Diggs. And the end of the game at the end of the Cardinals game, the guy who caught that touchdown pass was Stephon Diggs. And that was an incredible play. It wasn't the same thing as Tyler Kroft's touchdown catch against the Rams. It was better. You look at the throw, you look at the trajectory, you look at the passing lane, you look at the catch. It was an incredible play by two special players. And, that's a play that you bring Stephon Diggs into Buffalo to make. Similar to that you brought DeAndre Hopkins in Arizona to make a play like he made. You saw two very special wide receivers making two very special plays at the conclusion of this game. That was a really good game. But back to the discussion of the positive notes, I also misspoke at the start of this conversation because we're doing two each, two positive, two negative. I'm sorry, I said 3 initially. But the second positive on for the Bills, in my opinion, is the recognition that they need to send extra guys in order to manufacture pressure, and they're not just sending 4 every single play. When we talk about adjustments, whether it's in-game, whether it's midway through the season, whether it's, just adjustments throughout the duration of football being played, it is huge that this Bills defense and Leslie Frazier and Sean McDermott have recognized, it took them a little over halfway through the season to recognize it, but you've seen it against the Seahawks, and now you've seen it against the Cardinals. They are sending much more exotic looks in terms of blitz packages and more blitz packages at that. So I think it's extremely encouraging for this defense that has had an issue rushing the passer and getting sacks and getting home to the quarterback. I think it's huge that this defense, that the coaches have realized that they need to send extra guys in order to manufacture pressure, and that in turn will lead to bigger plays for the secondary, as you've seen these last 2 weeks with the turnovers they've been able to create. I think being able to create pressure, you'll see turnovers coincide with that, and I think it's huge if this Bills defense can maintain the identity of pressuring the quarterback as they've had these last 2 weeks. I think it changes the trajectory and the complexion of this defense going forward, really.
They found something that AJ Klein's good at. We had complained all season long about the Bills' lack of ability to put pressure on the quarterback and how it was hurting their secondary. And now that they've started blitzing more and they've been able to put pressure on the quarterback, I think it's made a noticeable difference. And I think that the one thing that maybe the Bills were hesitant to test, but now that they've seen it's working, is you can get away with sending those extra guys because your secondary players are that good. I mean, you have Trey playing corner, your safeties are 2 really quality players, and you can get away with blitzing the quarterback because you have good secondary play, and you're not going to blow those coverages that much, maybe as some other teams who don't have as strong secondary players. And so I agree with you 100%. I think that it's made a noticeable difference in the last 2 weeks, and you should keep going to it going forward, especially when your defense is at full strength. Because the defensive line, the Bills defensive line has shown it's not going to get pressure on the quarterback by itself. It needs some help.
Wow, I had my mic turned off. I'm sorry. A little unprofessional there. But yeah, creating pressure is a huge part of this defense. It's what allows the corners to thrive in a primarily zone scheme. And now you've seen these players taking advantage of it. You've seen the defense look far more aggressive. And I think that the aggressive identity of the Bills defense is one that suits it very well. With that, that kind of coincides with the negative part of the Bills defense. Here we'll transition to our negative takeaways through this point of the season. They miss a true one technique defensive tackle on the interior. I understand that's kind of low hanging fruit at this point, considering there isn't really many available. You couldn't really acquire one at the trade deadline. So not having that one technique defensive tackle is detrimental for this defensive line. And that's why you see them having to send multiple guys in order to get pressure on quarterbacks. That's why you don't see them just sending 4 guys. And that's why you also see this defense allowing still over 200 yards rushing per game. That's not how many they're allowing per game, but you saw them allow another 200-yard performance by the opposing offense against the Cardinals. And that's detrimental. You lose football games allowing that many yards on the ground. And, it's really kind of just been the bugaboo for this defense, and not having that one technique defensive tackle is huge. You can't play the certain players that you acquired in the offseason, or even Ed Oliver, who you got in the first round last year. You can't really play these players on your defensive line to the variances that you want to, or really have that flexibility that you thought you would when you first had Star Lotulelei going into this season. But obviously he opted out, and you lost your one technique defensive tackle. You have to play Ed Oliver more so in a zero technique. You have to play him more in a one technique. You can't really send Quentin Jefferson out there to play defensive end. AJ Epinesa left this past game with a concussion after the first drive. You really kind of are limited up front, not having your one technique defensive tackle, not having the versatility of putting players where they can potentially be better utilized. I think not having that one technique defensive tackle is really the what has caused all the woes for the Bills defense to this point. Obviously they're going to stick with the guys that they have, and they're going to try and figure out a solution in-house, and maybe sending more pressure, sending more manufactured pressure at quarterbacks is the answer in order to get pressure on quarterbacks, because that really was the problem. It's promising to see them make that adjustment, but it's going to be interesting to see what they do to counterpunch the counterpunch, if you will, through the duration of the rest of the season.
Yeah, and getting that run stopper would be so big, because they give up 217 yards rushing this week, and they've gotten thrashed by several teams this year in the run game, and that would be huge. And sorry to kind of switch gears on you here quick, but a couple of comments about Dane Jackson. I think Dane Jackson has been great. I mean, that play he made on the goal line against Hopkins, I mean, wow. We saw what Hopkins can do in the Hail Mary play, and how many guys are making that play, stopping Hopkins from somehow getting that ball. That was a great play that stood out to me, and I think that the Bills secondary is significantly better when Dane Jackson is in the game versus when he isn't. And now when you get Levi Wallace back, that may change. You're going to maybe slip him into some more coverages, and Jackson's role would go down a little bit, but Jackson has been really good. And other than Trey White, I put him up against anybody in that secondary room. I think him and Wallace are close. Maybe I'd even prefer Jackson, but.
Ooh, Justin, I'm sorry if I butcher your last name. Politnikov. I think that's how you say it. Let me know if it isn't. Wish we kept Vincent Taylor and got rid of Murphy instead. That is something I'm on board for, sir. That is something I'm on board for. They should have kept Vincent Taylor. I don't know. People will say it's a little mean to say they should have gotten rid of Trent Murphy, but they should have. He's kind of bad. He's not really good at too many things. But yeah, I think that's something that gets lost in this game, is the fact that Dane Jackson played very well when he was in the game. I really think they might have found something with him. A 7th round pick out of Pitt. I think they might have found something with Dane Jackson. You watch how he plays the game. He plays aggressive. He plays instinctive. You haven't really seen it get the better of him just yet, but he's not afraid to tackle. and he seems like a really good cover corner. It looks like he sticks with his man. He plays the ball and the man. He's looked like a good player thus far. I've seen the kind of instincts that I like to see in a corner, and those things you can't really teach. You can't teach the instincts like that. And you walk into the league, being on the practice squad for a majority of the season, and you have the instincts that you do. It's just natural. It comes to him naturally, and that tells me there's a lot of room. If he looks like this in his first handful of snaps in the NFL, I don't know that. Like I said earlier in the season when he had a solid game against I believe it was the Jets. I could be mistaken. Like I said, when he had a solid game earlier in the season, what I'm interested to see is to see how he maintains that level of play. If he is consistently the starter through the back half of the season and they don't really get a lot of their guys back, like Josh Norman, like Levi Wallace, if they're infected with COVID for an extended period of time, that is, I think you could have a real option there with Dane Jackson. I want to see him get his opportunity regardless. I don't care. Honestly, at this point, I don't really care if you have Josh Norman back. I don't really care if you have Levi Wallace back. I want to see Dane Jackson get his opportunity. I don't care if it's on the outside. I don't care if it's in nickel. I want to see Dane Jackson get his opportunity because while he's had his opportunities, he's made the most of them. And players like that, they only deserve more, in my opinion.
Yeah, and option, I think, is the great word to describe what Dane Jackson brings to this football team. He's a valuable option that you can go to, a quality option. He's not somebody who's going to be a liability bringing in, whether he is playing a big role or not. He's a guy who can dress and come into the game and eat up snaps for you. And I think that he showed that in his NFL debut when he played every snap of that game. He showed that he can do that, and that's a valuable part of your team in a position where the Bills have had injury problems this year. And that's why Jackson's here, right? Because the injuries.
And prior to those injuries, I thought this was one of the deepest cornerback rooms in football. And I wasn't even factoring in the fact that Dane Jackson was going to play out of his mind when he gets on the field.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. It's just, their depth has been tested at corner this season. You can say what you will about their passing defense and what they can make of it. I understand Trey White's gotten beat on a few plays and what have you. But, we have to get into our second negative point of this Bills team. I think anybody that's familiar with the Overtime podcast or any of my streams on the Cold Front Report, it's fairly obvious what the negative is that I'm going to say. And it's the fact that the Bills are a one-dimensional team on the offensive side of the ball, and they really don't have any kind of existence in the running game. I don't know. I don't see you going very far in the playoffs without having a running game. Is it possible that they have all these plays, all this creative stuff, intuitive stuff with the rushing attack they have yet to, I wouldn't say implement, but use in their arsenal on game day? I think that's very likely. Brian Dable before this season, he has always had really good rushing attacks, that's why I think the point of him having finally a good quarterback, good receiving core, I think the fact that he's just unloading this passing attack it's really because it's been the first time that he's been able to do that as an offensive coordinator. In years past, with my grudges about Brian Dable and what he does wrong and how he isn't a good offensive coordinator, and he wasn't before he came to Buffalo and what have you, it's always brought up about how, he's never had talent. He's never had talent at this level. He's never had talent at that level. He had Brady Quinn in Kansas City and et cetera. But now he finally has a solid quarterback, finally has a solid receiving core. And he's just whipping it away with this passing attack, throwing 40-plus times, multiple times this season. And like you touched on, Jeff, that is what has made the Bills' offense so successful this year, is the efficiency of their passing attack. But I simply cannot see this team going past 2 playoff games if they don't have an existent rushing attack. I really don't. You run to win football. That's how football is played. You watch as this season goes on, and you watch the successful football teams, you watch the quality football teams, what they all typically have in common is a solid defense and a solid rushing attack at their disposal when they need it. Do I think the Bills have the players and pieces in place to have a solid rushing attack? I do. Do I think they have a smart enough offensive coordinator to get the rushing attack under wraps and have it be an efficient part of this offense again? I do. It's just a matter of seeing it put together. And until I see it put together, aside from that New England performance, until I see it put together on a consistent basis, I cannot feel comfortable with the Bills' rushing attack going into the second half of the year.
Yeah, and I think that the main problem with the rushing attack is run blocking by the offensive line. I mean, those guys just aren't really good run blockers, a lot of them. But I'll turn it back on to you. What is your solution? Because if the Bills aren't going to make a deep playoff run without that rushing attack, I'm not convinced that the rushing attack is ever going to come this year. And so if you think they have the pieces to do so, then how can they do it?
I wouldn't necessarily say that I don't think it's going to happen, because like I mentioned, you have, I don't even know if you'd want to call them a solid offensive line, but when you have all of your dogs up front ready to go, I'm talking Dawkins, Feliciano, Morse, Ford, and then Williams, because I understand we've seen, like this comment says, unfortunately, from Justin Plitnikoff, unfortunately, Bean and McDermott took, quote unquote, the process a little too far when they got rid of Spain in favor of Cody, quote unquote, pulling up Ford. I I didn't read that part before I got to it, but that was pretty funny, Justin. But like he said, Cody Ford hasn't played extremely well at any position this year, but he's better than Brian Winters, in my opinion. I think when you have that solid offensive line, and I don't really know how many times they've had the same front game in and game out this season. If it's one thing that's missing from 2019 to 2020, I understand we don't have Quentin Spain anymore. That's a huge part of it, in my opinion. But let's pretend like Quentin Spain was never here. Let's talk about it this way. Last year, they started the same offensive line from week 1 to the playoffs. I understand Mitch Morse came out for spurts of time, and you had Ty Nsekhe and Cody Ford rotating at right tackle. But they started the same. They played the same 6 offensive linemen throughout the entire 2019 season from left to right, pretty much. And now you look at this season, and right from the very get-go, you see players shuffling around. I'm not going to blame it on Darrell Williams, because even though he's the newest face in that, you can't really say the newest, but one of the new faces along the offensive line, he's played solid. He's one of the best offensive linemen on that front. I really have to blame the inefficiency of the Bills' rushing attack to the instability along the interior. That's really what it has to do with. And I also believe it has to do with Brian Daboll's pass-heavy play calling and the lack of rhythm along the offensive line. I can't really say the preseason is an excuse anymore. At the beginning of the season, I thought that could have been a factor, because, the run game does take a lot more coordination with the 5 guys up front and the running backs understanding the designs of the plays. But a fix to this offensive, to the Bills' rushing attack, I don't necessarily have a perfect answer. But what I will say is that things are shaping up for the Bills' offensive line to get to be fully intact for the final stretch of the season, which opens the door for the opportunity for the Bills' rushing attack to also improve, which I think it's absolutely crucial that they have an efficient rushing attack at the end of the season. I'm not saying they need to be rushing for 200 yards every game. I'm saying you need to be existent in the rushing attack so that the opponent has to be afraid of it, so that the opponent has to game plan for it. Similar to that Pete Carroll had to game plan for it after the New England game. He touched on that in his post-game press conferences of, we had prepared for a much more run-heavy approach. And if they did that, we had a plan for it, but they didn't. They kept throwing the ball around. And, you can't really say that was a bad decision, considering, that was a very efficient day for the entire Bills offense. And I'm not saying it was. But what I am saying is the fact that other teams have to prepare for an efficient rushing attack is a huge part of game planning, is a huge part of this offense. It's an entirely different dimension of this offense that the Bills haven't even grazed the surface of. And they have all of the opportunities in the world to be a solid rushing offense. See, that's the thing about this Bills offense, is they aren't limited with their personnel. I understand they've had their injuries thus far, but assuming they get their guys back along the interior for this final stretch after the bye, they have all of their ammo in their arsenal. And it's going to be interesting to see what they decide to do with their rushing attack, or if they choose to continue forward with this pass-heavy approach.
So you think that the clearest path to a successful rushing attack for the Bills is to get all their offensive linemen back?
Having a good offensive line is always a key to having a successful rushing attack. I don't care who your running back is back there. It all starts with the offensive line.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it will be easier when you get everybody back and you have your quote unquote A offensive line, because you have two talented running backs who have shown that they're talented because they've gotten involved in the passing game. And while you don't want it to be the forefront of your rushing attack, you do have a quarterback who is very agile and very mobile, and he adds another possible attack to your rushing game. I mean, we saw a kind of a complete 180 rushing quarterback in Kyler Murray than Josh Allen. They play very differently. Murray's quick. He, can cut faster and he can go around you, whereas Allen can run through you, and he's a lot tougher to slow down once he gets going. And so we kind of saw that complete 180, but don't forget about Allen, being able to incorporate him in your rushing attack. But I agree with you that I think that the clearest path to a good rushing attack for the Bills is to get your offensive line right, because as far as run blocking is concerned, it hasn't been so far this year.
Since we've gone through our positive and negative points, I want to know how you feel about this team coming out of the bye with their schedule in mind, with the potential players that they could have coming back after the bye, with the players that they're going to get healthy after the bye. What is your overall thoughts of this football team going through the backstretch of the season?
I think they're going to be fun. I think it's going to be a fun last few games of the season. You come back, you get the Chargers, and then you play the 49ers, and then you get Pittsburgh at home. And that's going to be a big test to see where the Bills are at. But, I don't want people to forget about the fact that how you're playing in late December, early January is what's most important in this league. How you get there is equally important, obviously, because you got to get into the playoffs to begin with. But how you're playing week 17 and week 1 of the playoffs is so important. And the Bills have had several mishaps this season. The Chiefs game was a big step back. The Titans game might have even been an even bigger step back. But that was long ago. And by the time we get to late December, I think the Bills are going to be in a different place than they were then. And that's very important. I think the Titans are in a much different place now than they were when they played the Bills.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's so important of how you're playing teams when you get them. The Cardinals are playing very well right now. The Bills ran into a very good Cardinals team, and they almost beat them. We saw this week, based on Russell Wilson's performance, the Seahawks maybe aren't playing that good right now, and the Bills beat them. It's about who you're playing. It's about how you're playing when it comes down to the stretch. And so I'm excited to watch the Bills face a couple of these tests going forward and see where they're at. See if they have everybody back healthy at the end of the year and can make a playoff run, because that's where we are. That's what's important, is January.
The whole season. Ever since the schedule was released, Jeff, I think I called you and talked to you about it, actually. I was like, man, I love that late bye week, because every year the Bills have always had an average bye week. And when I say average bye week, I mean week 5, week 6, week 7, week 8, nothing interesting, nothing early, which I'm not going to say they should have a week 4 bye week. I think that sucks. It's bad for a football team to have a week 4 bye week, in my opinion. But the late bye week is extremely favorable. I wouldn't say I anticipated the Bills to be as beat up as they are at this point of the season. I didn't really initially anticipate that, because look at how healthy they were last year. I understand they were kind of due, if you will, in that regard. But a late bye week is never a bad thing for a football team. It can turn around your season entirely. What if the Bills lost consecutive games going into this bye week? You lose one to the Seahawks, you lose one to the Cardinals. Okay, now you have the bye week to regroup yourself, regain ground, and come together as a team and hopefully come out firing on all cylinders. Now you're coming off of a huge win against the Seahawks, and then a game that you should have won against the Cardinals that you lost on the last play of the game, which is an absolute gut-wrenching, heartbreaking loss that you're going to have on your temple now for 2 weeks. And you got to come out of this bye week, prepared to play football. This bye week is timed perfectly with their injuries. You have a lot of star players that could use a week off. You have a lot of I wouldn't say animosity, but there are motivated individuals in that locker room right now. When you lose a game that you you felt like you won as a football team. You like Jeff and I have said multiple times on this show, they did all the necessary things to win this football game. I don't think you can argue with that. It came down to a Hail Mary. They did the things they needed to do to win this game. When you lose a game that you weren't supposed to, it stings. It pisses you off. It motivates you. And that's a football team that I'm excited to see. A football team with a majority of their starters coming back after this bye week. I'm talking about Cody Ford. I'm talking about Mitch Morse, Matt Milano, maybe even possibly someone in the secondary. Maybe someone's moving to nickel corner this week if they have all of their defensive backs or next week if they have all of their cornerbacks at their disposal. It's a huge thing having the bye week at this point in time as you prepare to go on this last 6-game stretch as you head into the playoffs and hopefully earn yourself a home game or two for the playoffs. That's huge for this team going into these last 6 games, being able to get healthy and hopefully get a strong string of momentum going into the playoffs. Because if you remember last year, they lost in New England in week 16. Then they lost in a bench game to the Jets in week 17. They were coming off of consecutive losses going into that playoff game in Houston. And, as a young football team that doesn't have much experience in those situations, that doesn't have much, quote unquote, big game experience, being able to hone in your emotions and what have you in a big game, like, the first or the second Bills playoff game in 17 years or 18 years, it would have been. So that's a huge moment for a football team like this. And now here you are in 2020, hopeful to have a strong string of momentum going into the playoffs. I think all of this plays a part. And all of it are huge factors going into this second stretch of the season. And it's going to be exciting to see. That like you touched on, Jeff, that Steelers game is going to be a huge test. You have to take care of business against the Broncos and the Chargers, in my opinion. Those are 2 games that you have to come away with victories, those being AFC opponents. Those are big games. But speaking of the Broncos, they play Tua Tagovailoa this week. And also, everybody watching this right now, when I say this, you'll never unsee it, but Jeff Uvino looks like Drew Lock. He really does. You have the same face as Drew Lock.
I'm about to Google Drew Lock because I don't know exactly. I mean,
you have the same face as Drew Lock. You're gonna laugh when you see his picture.
I mean, I know what he looks like, but when somebody says that, you gotta take a second. So yeah.
But, the first game this week, the Dolphins visiting the possibly Drew Lockless Denver Broncos. Do you have a prediction while you look up a picture of his face on your phone?
Man, come on.
Your phone's too bright.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Come on. Whatever. Anyways, whatever. I don't look like him. But anyways, the Dolphins are going to win this game. They're hot. And I think that the AFC East will be tied after this weekend. That will be a big storyline. And you're right that the Bills need to beat the Chargers and they need to beat the Broncos. Those are 2 games they should win, 2 games they will win. And those are the things you need to do if you're going to beat Miami. As important as the head-to-head matchup is, as important as it is to beat New England again, you've got to beat those teams that you should, I think Miami will do so this week. Tua is going to get his head will be blown up even bigger. And for a score, I'll give you Miami 28, Denver 13.
I think the biggest problem for the Broncos in this game is whether or not they can score, because that Dolphins defense, like I mentioned earlier, they've been on fire. And if they don't have Drew Lock in this game, they're not scoring points with Brett Rippon. They're just not. It's not going to happen. I got to also take the Dolphins. I don't want to. I have some catching up to do in this point system that I also have to count from the last 3 weeks because I'm bad at tracking things on a week-to-week basis. But I will take the Dolphins. For a score, I'll say 23-9. I'm going to take the Dolphins 23-9. And now another opponent that the Bills have to play in a couple weeks. Jets visiting the Chargers, who have just managed to find a way to lose all these games that they've been competitive in. Can they beat the winless Jets?
Yeah, I mean, hey, Joe Flacco starting this week. He didn't look too bad last week. Maybe we could see an upset. But I think that the Jets' chance, if they're going to win a game, is going to be against the Patriots. Last week they had them. Flacco played well. Their receivers were playing well. Chargers getting back in the win column this week. It's going to be 24-16. A close game. I think Flacco plays all right again.
I kind of agree with that score, but I can't say the same score just for, point purposes. I'm going to say the Chargers are going to beat the Jets. I'll say 33-16. So the last divisional opponent for the Bills is the Patriots visiting the Texans. Patriots 4-5, coming off of a win. A big win against the Jets. I don't know what you'd call it. They haven't won a game this year, but the almost 500 Patriots going up against the 2-7 Texans. Who you got?
I got the Patriots. They did beat the Ravens, and that was, very encouraging. I didn't watch any of that game, but that was encouraging for them, and I think that Belichick gets back.
I'm out of order. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. I did just mention the Jets game, but I've got the Patriots. I think that they get back to 500, but I don't think that going forward, I don't think they're going to make noise in the AFC East. I just don't think they're as good as Buffalo and Miami, even though obviously, they played those teams close. They beat Miami. Patriots win 24-20.
24-20 Patriots over the Texans.
The Texans are in a bad spot.
They are in a bad spot
right now. I mean, do they have talent? Yes, but they just don't have it together like they have before. They're not the best team in that division like they have been for the last several years now.
Yeah, they're
they had that title down for a while and they've fallen.
Yeah, to say the least. I don't know. I like Deshaun Watson. I always like Deshaun Watson. Deshaun Watson is one of the most exciting players in the league. This is definitely going to be a game that I watch during the Bills bye week. Just for disagreement's sake, I'm going to say the Texans will win this game. I'll say 27-23. So
that game screams Monday Night Football. It's not, is it? I hope it's not. I don't know. That game just screams Monday Night Football to me, and I hope it's not.
I hope it's not too. It does scream Monday Night Football because it's Deshaun Watson and Cam Newton. But I think they need to stop putting the Patriots on primetime television. That's just. I don't think they should put them on there.
But anyways.
3
primetime games for the Bills out of their last 6. It's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun last few weeks.
Oh, it's going to be a roller coaster ride. And I hope everybody watching, everybody listening joins us for the ride. This has been a fun show going into the Bills bye week. Jeff, it's always fun. Please tell the people where they can find you.
If you'd like to find me on Twitter, you can do that at my handle below my name right now. It's RealJUvino. My Instagram is at JeffUVEINO. And I'm on Facebook and whatever else you want to look me up on.
I don't think you guys want to friend request Jeff on Facebook. He's boring.
Yeah. Well, not all of us can produce the content that you can, Clayton. Sorry.
Oh my God. Don't even try and sound a little more sarcastic.
Not all of us have the big social media network like you do.
I wouldn't call it good. I think you're getting a little out of reach there. It's not good. But
my words, not yours.
I mean, you need to follow the Cold Front Report on all of their handles before you follow me on any of mine. It's at Cold Front Report on Twitter, at Cold Front Report _ Bills News on Instagram, Cold Front Report on YouTube, and then Cold Front Report : Buffalo Bills News on Facebook. Be sure to drop a like on the Facebook page. Our members are growing daily to find all of the most engaging content you can find on the interweb. And be sure to stay tuned to the Cold Front Report webpage, which is having a completely different revamped look here this upcoming weekend. I believe Friday, I could be wrong. Jeff Uvino and I will start producing writing content for the Cold Front Report. You'll find it right there on the webpage. And if you'd like to find me, where you can find all of my quote unquote good social media content, you can find me on Twitter at CFR Clayton, at CFR CLAYTON. It's the same exact handle on Instagram. Don't friend request me on Facebook. I don't want to be friends with you. I'm just kidding. If you want to friend request me on Facebook, go ahead. I'll accept it. But anyways, thank you all for watching. Thank you all for listening. And this has been the Overtime Podcast presented by the Cold Front Report.